king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 65, Saving Firewood Stove. 4 kilometers west of Terholench, over a low hill, is a narrow beach with very fine sand. If it were in modern times, it would definitely be a great place for beautiful women in swimsuits to lie down and bask in the sun. Of course, this is the Middle Ages, and everyone wears robes. Not to mention the beauties, even men don't dare to take off their clothes and lie on the beach. Otherwise, the priest in the church will definitely come to redeem you, a lunatic, and maybe even tie you to the stake and have a human meat barbecue. Not far to the east of this beach is a small freshwater lake called Lake Holland, which can supply fresh water for life. Building a salt-making center is not an easy task. First of all, you need to choose a suitable site, which must be near the sea. The seawater must be salty enough and clean without any pollution. Secondly, you need to recruit enough people. Generally speaking, a large salt pot needs at least 2 or 3 workers to look after it. One person is responsible for lighting the fire, one person is responsible for watching the pot, and the other person is responsible for carrying fuel. After the salt is boiled, the salt in the pot must be taken out and packed. A salt boiling center certainly cannot use only one pot, it must set up a large row of salt boiling pots. Therefore, a lot of manpower is needed. In addition, the transportation of fuel and salt also requires a large number of manpower. For example, the salt-making center at Marin built on the beach near Lake Huron must first build enough salt-making stoves. Secondly, houses must be built for the salt-making workers to facilitate their lives. Finally, a flat road must be built from the port of Huronch to the salt-making base to facilitate the transportation of coal briquettes. Although the distance from Terholench to the salt boiling center is only about 4 kilometers, the western half of the road passes through a hilly area, making construction a little more difficult. In addition, Marin had to send people to big cities to order a large number of large iron pots and bricks for building stoves and houses. As for housing, Marin thought about it and decided to use adobe houses. Adobe houses are low in construction cost and comfortable. In addition, they are fast to build. But to build a stove for boiling salt, Marin still planned to use a lot of bricks and lime. Because he planned to use an energy-saving earth stove, also called a firewood-saving stove, and the high chimney of the energy-saving earth stove must be built with bricks. In his previous life, Malin's hometown was in the countryside, and the village had promoted energy-saving earthen stoves for a period of time. The so-called energy-saving earthen stove actually has a very simple principle, which is to build the furnace wall around the stove very thick so that when the fuel in the stove burns, the energy is not leaked to the surroundings. You should know that ordinary earth stoves only use 1 or 2 layers of bricks around them, which are not thick enough. When burning inside, the temperature of the furnace wall is also high, and the energy radiates through the furnace wall, and the effect is similar to that of a Kong. However, if the furnace wall is greatly thickened, the heat of the flame in the stove chamber will not be easily dissipated through the furnace wall. In this way, the energy utilization rate of the energy-saving stove is greatly improved. Moreover, the chimney of the energy-saving earth stove should be high, because a high chimney is easy to produce a siphon effect, sucking away the smoke in the furnace, and automatically sucking in air from the air inlet, which helps combustion. According to the technicians who promoted the firewood-saving stove in the past, the firewood-saving stove saves 1/3 to 1/2 of the fuel compared to the old earthen stove, and saves 1/4 to 1/3 of the burning time. Therefore, the firewood-saving stove is very powerful. Marin used this technology to cook salt, which can be regarded as strict cost control and a model of capital management. In order to build this salt-making center, Marin decided to recruit labor on a large scale. Because there was a serious shortage of labor on the island, and they had to engage in their own occupations. Therefore, if Marin wanted manpower, he had to go to the land to find it. At the end of the 15th century, after more than 100 years of recovery, Europe had recovered a lot of the population lost due to the Black Death in the 14th century. Originally, many manors were short of labor. But 100 years later, after several generations of reproduction, many manors began to have a surplus of labor. For example, the number of acres of land in a manor was certain, and the number of serfs recruited by the serf owner was also just right. However, a serf family did not necessarily have only one boy. Therefore, if there were no other industries that required a lot of labor, the serf owners were not willing to support those extra men. Therefore, many serfs' sons could not even inherit their father's status as serfs. These people either went to other newly opened farms to become serfs, or they went to the city to work as coolies. Even so, many people still found it difficult to find work. As a result, many people became beggars and refugees. Some of the brave and strong ones became mercenaries, and some became robbers. The reason why German mercenaries were able to develop was not only due to the Germanic nation's martial tradition, but also because the surplus children of serfs could not find work. Marin now wants to go to those manors with too many people to recruit a group of honest and hard-working serfs to help him boil salt. Of course, they have to help Marin build the salt boiling center and the road to Thuringe first. For this reason, Marin went to Germany again. He did not recruit people in the Netherlands because the accent of people in the Netherlands was too different from that in other parts of Germany. Marin can speak German, Latin and Frisian, but not Dutch. Therefore, Marin finds it very difficult to communicate with the Dutch and always needs an interpreter. It seems that Dutch and Frisian are both West Germanic languages, and cannot communicate with most German dialects. This is also one of the important reasons for the separation between the Netherlands and Greater Germany. For example, in Westphalia, where the Marin family is located, although the accent is different, it is still possible to communicate with Saxons and Austrians if you speak slowly. But when facing the Dutch, the Germans in the German-speaking area are a bit at a loss. For the sake of convenience, Marin went directly to his hometown in the Ruhr area to recruit the surplus labor of those manors. With the help of old Hoffman, Marin quickly recruited 500 serfs to follow him to Texel Island to boil salt. Marin, is your method of boiling salt reliable? Mrs. Mary asked worriedly. Of course it's reliable. The British make a lot of money from this. When he quietly told Mrs. Mary the profit of boiling salt, Mrs. Mary opened her mouth in surprise. But if salt boiling is so profitable, why don't other people do it? Mom, not every family can successfully purchase large quantities of coal. The Netherlands lacks wood and firewood. They have to import firewood from other places. It is not as convenient as our use of ships to transport coal. Moreover, in the whole of Western Europe, only Britain and the Ruhr River region in Germany are rich in coal. The British have already started to make a fortune by boiling salt with coal, but the coal in the Ruhr region has not yet been developed. And I am the first German to make a fortune by boiling salt with coal. What Marin said is true. Although using coal to boil salt is very profitable, there are only a few coal-producing areas in Europe. In Western Europe, it seems that only the Ruhr area and northern England produce a lot of coal. If other places want to learn this trick, they also need coal. Moreover, due to the underdeveloped technology, mainly suppressed by the Vatican, many people do not know that the calorific value of coal is much higher than that of firewood. Marin, my child, you are so smart. But you have to think about one thing, what is the problem? The problem is sales. Child, you can cook a lot of salt, but you have to find a way to sell it to make money. So, Mom, do you have any suggestions? Cooperate with the merchants of the Hanseatic League. Those Hanseatic merchants have many privileges in the empire. If you cooperate with them, you can ship a large amount of goods. Otherwise, it will be difficult to sell your salt. Moreover, you must not be enemies with those Hanseatic merchants. If you are enemies with them, they will block the sale of your salt. Lady Mary is very knowledgeable. She knows that Hanseatic merchants are arrogant in the empire. She is afraid that Marin will clash with Hanseatic merchants because of his youth and vigor. Speaking of which, Lady Mary's grandmother's family was also a merchant. At the beginning, her grandmother's family had offended Hanseatic merchants, and as a result, they were suppressed and almost bankrupt. If it weren't for the help of the Bloch family, Lady Mary's grandfather would have gone bankrupt and committed suicide. It was also because of this that Lady Mary's grandfather took great risks to take in Lady Mary's father and married his daughter to him when the Bloch family was destroyed. Therefore, Lady Mary did not want Marin to follow the old path. You know, the Hanseatic League is very powerful. They control the trade privileges of many cities in the Holy Roman Empire, pay less taxes than others, and have more conveniences than others. Although countries such as Britain and Denmark began to compete with the Hanseatic League would not decline in the short term. The real decline of the Hanseatic League had to wait until the rise of Dutch merchants. But the Netherlands had not yet been truly developed, and Antwerp had not yet developed. Therefore, the Hanseatic League was still very powerful these days. At least, in the German region, they were invincible. I understand, Mom, I will be careful about this matter. Marin said solemnly. Afterwards, Marin found the Wiggins Chamber of Commerce in Cologne again and hired their ships to transport these 500 serfs to Texel Island. Chapter 66 Cooperation. In the city of Cologne, Marin met Wright, the manager he had dealt with before, again. Good morning, Baron. How can I help you? The Wiggins Chamber of Commerce is a member of the Hanseatic League, and Cologne is also an important commercial center of the Hanseatic League. Therefore, the news here is much more informed than the Mark State. Therefore, the news of Marin's knighthood was easily spread here. As the director of the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce, Wright naturally knew Marin's identity. However, Light found it hard to believe that the young man who had bribed him had suddenly become an imperial baron and was spreading his heroic deeds throughout the empire. I'm here to hire a ship. I heard that the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce has a lot of idle transport ships. Marin went straight to the point. The Germans were not used to being polite. Yes, the economic situation is not very good right now. There are wars everywhere in Europe, which has affected the business of our Chamber of Commerce. The war is Italy's business, how does it have anything to do with you? Marin was very surprised. My Lord Baron, Italy is not the only country in Europe that is at war. For example, our Hanseatic League has conflicts with Denmark from time to time. In the UK, the War of the Roses has also affected our business. In addition, the great nobles in northern Germany often have frictions with each other. In short, wars are raging everywhere in Europe. Marin was silent. In the fragmented Germany, it was not uncommon for nobles to attack and annex each other. Of course, no one dared to provoke the Hanseatic League easily. Because whoever dared to go to war with the Hanseatic League would be blocked from commercial activities in the noble territory. Moreover, many nobles were in poor economic conditions and needed to borrow money from the Hanseatic League. The German region is now in turmoil because Maximilian I of the Habsburg family is about to rise, but the German princes strongly resist the rise of the Habsburg family and even seek to deprive the Habsburg family of the qualification to monopolize the throne and return to the era when the princes choose the emperor. However, the German princes were scattered and not very united. Maximilian I rose to power with the help of mercenaries and had the strength to deal with these princes. Unfortunately, the ambitious Maximilian I encountered two powerful enemies, Hungary and France, and had no time to take care of other things. Therefore, the balance in Germany could be maintained, otherwise, war would have broken out long ago. I came to you this time because I hope your Chamber of Commerce's transport ship can help me transport a batch of serfs. Is the Baron's territory short of people? Yes, the area of Texel Island is not small, but the population is too small, only 800 people. So, I recruited 500 serfs and took them to Texel Island to reclaim wasteland and develop it. My Lord Baron is very bold. It takes a lot of money to support so many people. Wright's meaning was very obscure. In fact, he questioned Marin's ability to pay. He was also afraid that Marin would refuse to pay after letting the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce transport the people, or would default on the payment for thousands of years. Don't worry, I made a fortune in Italy. Hee. Wright understood immediately. In his opinion, Marin probably robbed a lot of property in Italy. In fact, Marin didn't rob civilians much, only a few merchants. His wealth mainly came from selling spoils and captives to the Venetians. Okay, then, let's sign an agreement and pay a 30% deposit first. Wright is a businessman and he attaches great importance to contracts. Yes, no problem. By the way, Manager Wright, I want to ask, does your Wigan's Chamber of Commerce do salt business? Salt business? Wright was stunned for a moment, but reacted immediately. We do have a salt business, but it's not very big. The salt of our Chamber of Commerce mainly comes from the Lüneburg salt mine. However, the Lüneburg salt mine is controlled by some big salt merchants, and we can't really get involved. Every year, we can only get a few thousand quarts of mineral salt from the Lüneburg salt mine. Moreover, the mineral salt is quite bitter and not very tasty. In general, the sale of salt is one of the businesses of the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce, but due to the supply problem, it has never taken off. Ever thought of importing sea salt from England? Sea salt? That's a good idea. However, British sea salt is in short supply, and the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce has no channels in the UK, so we can't get the salt there. Wright said honestly. What if I gave you a large supply of sea salt? You have sea salt? Wright asked in surprise. But he thought, isn't Texel just an island? What's so strange about producing sea salt? But isn't the Netherlands short of fuel? Otherwise, they wouldn't import salt from Britain. Not yet, but soon. As far as I know, there is a shortage of firewood in the Netherlands. What do we do at Hoffman Estates? Marin asked. Selling coal. Oh, I understand. The last time you hired a ship was to transport coal to make salt. Wright suddenly realized. Well, it's good that you know. So, are you interested in being the agent for our Texel Island sea salt? I heard that you were responsible for selling coal in Cologne. How about adding a salt business? Well, I have to ask my brother-in-law. Wright said cautiously. I'll give you 3 pfennigs per quart of salt as a reward for your hard work. Deal. Wright stood up immediately. This guy was the most greedy. When he heard about the kickback, he immediately agreed. Anyway, the business was not his, but the kickback was his. As the brother-in-law of the boss of Wigan's Chamber of Commerce, he has great power in the Chamber of Commerce. The big boss of the Chamber of Commerce lives in Hamburg and his main business is also in Hamburg. The business in Cologne is all decided by Wright. Soon, Marin and Wright signed an agreement, and the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce purchased a large amount of sea salt from Texel Island at a wholesale price of 3 shillings and 6 pfennigs per quarter. This price was not high, because the price of salt in inland areas of Germany was much higher than that in coastal areas, reaching 5 or 6 shillings per quarter, or even more, mainly depending on the distance of the area from the salt production area. Then, the two signed a private secret agreement, stipulating that Wright actually paid Marin 3 shillings and 3 pfennigs for every quarter of salt. The extra 3 pfennigs naturally went into Wright's pocket. As for the supply volume, Marin has not yet determined it, because the specific output can only be known after actual production. However, neither Marin nor Wright are worried about sales. Because the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce has extensive connections and channels in the Rhine River business circle, it can easily ship goods. Salt was also a very scarce commodity in the Middle Ages. Because there were no refrigerators or other refrigeration methods in the Middle Ages. Many meats must be preserved by salt. In addition, the daily needs of ordinary people are very large. Therefore, salt is still not a problem to sell. Especially, sea salt, which is of better quality than Lüneburg mineral salt. Chapter 67, Daily Production of 1,000 quarts of refined salt. After returning to Texel with 500 serfs, Marin immediately led them to build a large-scale construction project. First, he built adobe houses for all 500 households as their homes, then, 700 male laborers from 500 serfs were organized to start road construction. As for the salt boiling center by the sea, Marin specially invited several professional bricklayers from Cologne to help build a wood-saving stove. In addition, Marin sent ships to the mainland to bring in a lot of bricks. The firewood-saving stove is not technically difficult. The only problem is building a tall chimney. Ordinary people can build a stove wall, but if they are not professional masons, they cannot build a tall chimney. If they are not done well, the tall chimney will easily collapse. Therefore, Marin specially invited masons to build a firewood-saving stove for boiling salt. Professionals are professionals, and several masons completed the task well, building 20 wood-saving stoves with high chimneys. Kohler also took back the 20 large iron pots that had been ordered from Amsterdam, because there were many places that needed to be built on the island. Marin simply kept the 8 bricklayers he borrowed from Wright. He also sent someone to greet Wright and bring back the families of the 8 people. Because they had formed an alliance of interests, Wright did not hesitate and immediately agreed to Marin's request that it took a month to build the salt boiling center by the sea. The 700 strong men also successfully completed the road from Thalench to the salt boiling center. In addition, they also took the time to dig a ditch on the beach of the salt boiling center to the sea, so that seawater could flow in and make it easier for everyone to get seawater. In addition, Marin asked them to dig a small drainage ditch to discharge brine. After the road was repaired, coal briquettes unloaded from Terhollanch began to be transported to the salt-making center. This salt-making center was named Salt Town by Marin, with 20 large pots running at full capacity. After many tests, everyone finally determined that 1,000 quarts of sea salt could be produced per day. Moreover, the new technology proposed by Marin was applied to salt boiling, and refined salt with good taste was obtained. Actually, it is not really an advanced technology. The main thing is that when the salt is boiled to the final stage, some seawater is left, and it is not completely evaporated, but poured away. This part of seawater actually contains salts such as magnesium chloride and potassium chloride, which are more soluble than salt. Magnesium salt is different from table salt in that it is very bitter, while calcium salt is astringent. If the seawater is boiled dry, the salt left is coarse salt, which tastes slightly bitter because it is mixed with magnesium salt, calcium salt and other impurities. The part of seawater that was dumped out was called bitter brine. The salt obtained by dumping out the bitter brine was barely considered refined salt. This refined salt also contained some magnesium salts, but the content was very low. The bitterness of refined salt was relatively light and difficult to taste. The difference in taste between this and the refined salt that was chemically treated in later generations was relatively small. In the Middle Ages, the British cooked salt without removing the bittern. Therefore, their salt could only be considered coarse salt. The mineral salt from Lüneburg and other salt mines was even more bitter, and there was very little high-quality refined salt without bitterness. In fact, the secret to removing bittern is that people accidentally scooped up some salt grains from the bittern during the salt drying process and tasted them. They found that they had no bitter taste, so they kept the bitter and only scooped up the refined salt with good taste. In the salt boiling era, people used to boil the sea water dry to get the coarse salt at the bottom of the pot. Generally, no one pours out the bittern when it is halfway through boiling, and no one knows how to remove the bittern. The refined salt produced under Marin's guidance tasted better than most of the salt currently in Europe. After tasting it, Wright immediately rated it as a high-quality refined salt, and believed that only nobles were worthy of eating this kind of refined salt. Wright didn't quite understand the reason, and thought it was because the quality of the seawater in the Texel area was good. But he didn't know that Marin just added an extra step of pouring out the bittern. But this simple step greatly improved the taste of the salt. For the refined salt produced in Yencheng, after pouring out the bittern, Marin also asked to add some fresh water to dilute some impurities such as magnesium ions, and then pour it out. In this way, there will be less bittern residue. Then, the remaining salt was heated to evaporate the water. Then, someone used a copper hammer to smash the salt particles. In this way, the refined salt produced in Yencheng was a powdered white salt similar to the refined salt of later generations. This white powdery salt was definitely considered high-end salt in medieval Europe, so it is no wonder that Wright gave it a high evaluation. In fact, because of the high quality, Wright took the initiative to raise the purchase price to 4 shillings. Of course, his 3 pfennig benefit remained unchanged. After cost calculation, these 20 salt boiling pots only consumed 15 charterlongs of coal briquettes per day because of the use of firewood-saving stoves. In other words, the 50 charterlongs of coal briquettes provided by Hoffman Estate every day were not used up, and only less than 1/3 were used. In fact, Marin could expand salt production. However, Marin felt that at the beginning, he needed to test the market's reaction and did not need to produce so much. Otherwise, if he produced too much and could not sell it, it would be troublesome. The 20 salt boiling pots, plus the labor for transporting coal, etc., altogether required less than 100 people. Then, there were 600 more young and strong laborers. This time, Marin brought 500 serf families from the island, with a total population of 3,100 people, including 700 young and strong laborers. At present, only 100 people were needed to boil salt, so Marin simply took the remaining 600 people to reclaim wasteland near Denburg. Now, it is the beginning of March in the early spring. Spring plowing is about to begin. Marin has 1,000 draft horses that can be used to plow the land. However, these draft horses lack plows. So, Marin sent Kohler to nearby cities to recruit a group of skilled blacksmiths to settle in Denburg. At the same time, he bought a lot of iron ingots, wood, and some forging equipment. When these blacksmiths arrived on the island, Marin immediately arranged for them to work with the carpenters on the island to make a batch of curved plows and various iron working tools. Afterwards, these farm tools were distributed to the serfs, and the farmers from the original 3 farms were assigned to take care of the original 800 ugrams of farmland under Marin's arrangement, all the human and horse feces on the island were poured into the fields, which caused widespread protests from the serfs, who felt that Marin's actions had simply polluted the grain fields and would make the grain grown there disgusting. But Marin had no time to pay attention to their protests. Under the suppression of 400 soldiers, the serfs had to do as they were told. Otherwise, the angry serfs would beat Marin up. However, Marin had a castle and 400 brave soldiers who had seen blood. Even though these honest serfs felt disgusted, they had no choice but to do as they were told. While arranging the serfs to farm, Marin also asked Kohler and Saul to take people to pick up the families of these guys door to door according to the addresses given by the soldiers. The reason why Kohler was sent was because he was the most tactful servant under Marin and was very good at handling things. For example, if the family members were held hostage by the original manor owner and refused to release them, Kohler had enough eloquence to negotiate with him. He could even bargain and use money to redeem them. Therefore, only Kohler is suitable for this matter. Saul can barely do it, and Schwartz and others are not suitable. Marin himself is actually suitable, but he is now a lord, and there are a lot of things in the territory, and he is too busy. Moreover, it is too embarrassing to go out in person to pick up the family of a soldier. If he goes out in person to pick up the family of his generals, it would be okay. But the family of his number 1 General Schwartz has already been settled in Hoffman Manor. Therefore, there is no need for him to win people's hearts anymore. Those big soldiers are not worth his personal attention. After Kohler left, Marin calculated the cost himself. He found that the actual selling price of 1,000 quarts of refined salt produced in Yencheng was 3 shillings and 9 pfennigs per quart. After deducting the price of coal briquettes, transportation costs, and labor costs, the total was about 9 pfennigs. On average, his profit per quart of refined salt was as much as 3 shillings. 1,000 quarts, that is, a net profit of 3,000 shillings. And 3,000 shillings is 150 pounds, or 225 marks, equivalent to 600 ducats. This is a day's profit. Marin was stunned. 600 gold coins a day, 365 days a year. Even if you deduct holidays such as Christmas and New Year, there are at least 350 working days. There are no weekends these days, at most major holidays. So, can't I make 210,000 gold coins a year? Marin was so excited that he trembled a little, just like Wu Lao next door who had a cerebral thrombosis. Chapter 68, Dividing the Land. Outside the city of Denberg, spring plowing was underway vigorously. With the introduction of the curved plow and the fact that Malin already had 1,000 draft horses, the speed of land reclamation was relatively fast. During the time of plowing and sowing, Marin reclaimed 2,200 ugrams of new arable land, applied manure, and sowed rye seeds. Of course, in order to raise horses, 200 ugrams were planted with oats. Because horses consume a lot of oats, note, there was no soybean more suitable for horse feeding in Europe at this time. You know, this is 1,030 horses. During this period, Marin spent a lot of money just to buy oats. Fortunately, Marin had enough money to avoid bankruptcy. If it were an ordinary small landowner, the feed for 1,000 horses would make him bankrupt. Under Kohler's operation, the families of soldiers came one after another. The adobe house was quite practical and could accommodate a whole family. You know, many European serfs now lived in thatched houses that would collapse in the wind or leak in the rain. Poor families could not afford bricks and stones, nor could they afford wood. In fact, many poor people's houses were simply built with firewood and dry grass, with some mud on the outside. This kind of broken house was much worse than the regular adobe house built by Marin. However, the adobe house looks ordinary and rustic, and looks like a poor family's home. Only when the surface is painted with lime, the appearance is much better. But Marin's idea is that in addition to the practicality of adobe houses, they are also low cost and fast to build. If you want to build a brick house, you have to send people to the mainland to buy bricks and hire a large number of masons, which is both expensive and time-consuming. As for Marin himself, he actually didn't feel comfortable living in the castle. Castles are different from villas. Villas have good lighting, large windows, and lots of glass. Castles, for safety reasons, have very small windows, like observation holes and shooting holes. Therefore, the light in the castle is very dim and uncomfortable. In some places inside the castle, you have to light lamps or torches even in broad daylight to see clearly. Fortunately, the room on the south side of the third floor of the main building in the center of the castle had good light and large windows. But what surprised Marin was that the glass windows were very strange. Why is it weird? It turns out that the glass windows and doors are indeed made of glass, but the glass looks very uneven. This is because the glass windows and doors are made up of small pieces of glass. Each piece of glass is about the size of a few palms. When asked why, it turned out that in this era, glassware was blown by craftsmen. Craftsmen could not blow glass plates of too large an area. Marin suddenly thought of the roller pressing method technology for making large flat glass. However, he had no plans to make glass for the time being, and he did not have relevant technical talents, so this idea only flashed through his mind. Marin had promised to distribute land to his brothers. So, one morning after the spring plowing, Marin asked Schwartz to gather all his brothers. "Brothers, I have promised to distribute land to you before. Now that the spring plowing is over, it is time to fulfill my promise." Upon hearing this, the soldiers under his command all looked eager, but due to strict discipline and habit, they did not make any noise. But, as you know, there is not much land on the island. Even a baron like me spent a lot of money to buy out 800 ugrams of arable land. Including the newly reclaimed land, the total is only 3,000 ugrams. After thinking about it, I plan to distribute 2,000 ugrams to all the brothers. On average, each family will get 5 ugrams. Do you have any objections? Marin asked. The soldiers received the command at ease and could reply. They all shook their heads to show that they had no objection. Just kidding, Marin only had 3,000 ugrams in total. What else can he say if he took out 2,000 ugrams? In this day and age, nobles who are willing to share the spoils with soldiers are considered good people. What's more, Marin took out 2/3 of the total cultivated land and divided it equally among his men. What else can he say? This is the Middle Ages, not the modern times. It is a gift for nobles to give things to civilian subordinates, which is not what they should have. 5 uglams is 10 acres, equivalent to 60 mu of land. If you calculate carefully, it is definitely not a small amount. I dare not say anything else, but it is definitely enough to keep the family from starving. You know, Marin promised publicly that the 5 ugrams of land belonged to the soldier's family privately. Moreover, during the soldier service, he was completely exempt from any taxes. Of course, the church's tithes had to be paid by himself. Even after retiring, Marin will only collect 10% of the tax. In other words, 80% of the profits belong to him. This is completely unimaginable in today's Europe. You know, in Europe, the taxes on serfs and self-employed farmers are very high. Needless to say, most of the income of serfs was taken away by the serf owners, leaving only basic rations and scarce supplies. Even self-employed farmers had to bear at least 40% of the rent, see German Peasant War. That's not all. The lords, non-serf owners, sometimes levied some heavy taxes and taxes. Fishing and hunting had to be taxed, and they were heavy taxes. Therefore, hunters in the Middle Ages were actually not doing well. Before, Marin's hunting in the Black Forest was actually poaching. However, they rode horses and came and went without a trace. Even if the local lords got the news and chased them for taxes, they would have left long ago. Moreover, Marin brought a few younger brothers with him, who looked like knights at first glance. Ordinary small lords did not dare to provoke them casually. If the wandering knights were provoked, it would hurt people. Those small lords were also bullies. 60 mu of land, even if the yield of rye is 150 jin per mu, can harvest 9,000 jin of rye, which is about 10,000 pounds. If 80% is left, it will be 8,000 pounds of rye. 8,000 pounds of rye. How many people can eat it? In a day, a family of several people will only eat a few pounds of rye, right? Assuming a family of 5, even if all 5 people are big eaters, each person can only eat 2 pounds of rye at most, right? In fact, that is impossible, because the black bread of poor people is mixed with a lot of strange things. For example, wild vegetables and weeds, even soil and sawdust. Therefore, for an average family, a few pounds of rye a day is enough to make bread, and there are a lot of other adulterants in it. In 365 days a year, only a few hundred pounds of rye are consumed. The remaining 8,000 to 9,000 pounds of rye, how much can it be sold for? The rough soldiers started to count with their fingers, and the more they counted, the happier they became, as if they had seen an infinitely bright future. Don't be happy too soon, soldiers. This 5 ugrams of land will only be yours if you serve me wholeheartedly. If you run away on the battlefield, this land will be taken back. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. If they wanted the land, they couldn't run away in the future. But, didn't they fight for their families to live a better life? If the land was taken back, how would their families live? Boss, what if I die in battle? What happens to the land? Asked a soldier. If you die in battle, or become disabled while fighting for this lord, then this land will belong to your family forever. In addition, the lord tax will be exempted for 20 years. After 20 years, I will continue to collect taxes at 10%, and I will never collect more. There will be no miscellaneous taxes. As for the church's tithe, that is not within my jurisdiction. However, if you die in battle and your family cannot pay the tithe in a short period of time, I will help to advance the payment. The conditions are so generous. Many people were very excited. In fact, these mercenaries had already prepared to die and were not afraid of death. They were just afraid that after they died, no one would take care of their families. Marin's promise obviously solved their worries. Boss, I have a question. Said a soldier, raising his hand. Explain. It doesn't really matter if I die in battle, it's just what? Just tell me. But I haven't married yet and have no offspring. Said the young man with a blushing face. Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed. However, what the soldier said was right. When Marin selected soldiers, he selected poor young people who were not married or could not afford to get married. Everyone's situation was similar. That's no problem. I promised you that I would help you find a wife. How about this? When I'm done with my busy schedule, I'll think of a way to help you find a wife. Great. Long live the boss. Stop talking nonsense, come on, let's draw lots to claim the land. Marin took out a box filled with numbered slips of paper, representing the marked land.